And the 3 that I'd left turned over, because that was the 3 that I've read, are different cards now. There's 3 different cards.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people, because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
And all of a sudden I hear him go, whoa, or, something like that. So I look up, and as I look up, I see this thing.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. And from this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just kind of, my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward. And I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. We've just been talking with Emma from the UK, but I will ask, Emma, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay tonight.
Well, you've got fairies misplacing tarot cards. And that's on the level of, them moving glasses in my house. So welcome to the club. Shout out again to Danielle and her crazy dolls. Here on the Fascinating Fae podcast, for those that are perhaps tuning in for the first time and have generously listened to that, which just occurred, that's not usually how we start things. Normally, I like to set a few ground rules so that everyone feels safe and comfortable in my company, and that usually goes like this. So, Emma, here on Fascinating Fae, we're not here to convince anyone of anything. We're simply here to collect amazing stories, insights, thoughts, and feelings about the Fae, of which we've done a healthy dose of already, so thanks for that. That's great. And I know you've got like a number of things that you're willing and hoping to talk with me about. So usually when that's the case, I just ask that a guest move along in more or less chronological fashion. Free associations aside, those are always permitted, of course. But yeah, we're just not here to, convince anyone of anything. We like it if you take your time. You've been so generous with your intro. I'm sure that the audience already has a nice feel for you as a person. So you might be able to spare a little bit of the context, but I do like to know kind of what you were doing that day and what was going on. So we can kind of ease into the encounters. If you would be so kind as to walk us into the first Fae-related thing that you'd like to talk about, I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say next.
Thank you. Oh, thanks for having me on. I've been really looking forward to speaking with you. And we got there in the end with the tech problems. But yeah, so basically, I have always had a connection with what I term as spirit. So it's people that have passed away, just energies. I can sort of sense energies of place as well. And I've just had, ever since childhood, numerous encounters. I did a couple of obviously podcast chats with Claire at the Fairy Whispering podcast as well, to tell her a couple of experiences from childhood. But I had an experience that I'd actually forgotten about. It was in the same childhood home as the experience I'd told Claire, where like most mornings I used to wake up and see these little little beings behind my bedroom curtains on the windowsill. And that happened on a regular basis, and I can just see it all in my mind as clear today as back then. The memories never ever left me. But I actually was it was like a day retreat I'd gone to with a couple of friends, and we'd done a drumming circle, and we were in the middle of some breath work and a bit of meditation. And I saw literally a flashback of a memory of another experience that I'd had in that house. So I would have probably been about 4 or 5 years old. And again, it was in my bedroom. And I've never suffered from sleep paralysis or sleepwalking or anything like that. These experiences, I know I was definitely very much awake when they happened. Like, even as a child, I know I was awake when these things happened. But this memory, Jim, it was basically, I was in my bed, and at that house, my mum always used to put my dressing gown over the bottom of my bed because it had like a wooden frame. And this memory popped back in of these two little gnomes, or gnome-like characters. I have actually drawn a picture of them because sometimes I will do. I'm not like the best artist in the world or trained or anything. I just do it for my mental health and just creative expression, really. But I often draw any spiritual encounters that's with either deceased people or fae or whatever. I'll write the experience down, like the date, the time, if I've got that knowledge, and obviously draw a little picture of who or what I saw. So I've got a record of it. So I've drawn a picture of these two little characters, so I can always send you those along at a later date. But basically, they climbed up the belt of my dressing gown over the side of the bed onto the mattress, like, so they're at the foot of the bed, and they were just very young, childlike gnomes. They had orange hats, the typical pointy hat, yellow long sleeve sort of shirts, tunic type shirts, and brown trousers on. And that was all the memory was they climbed up the dressing gown onto the bottom of the bed, and they were really clumsy and falling over and rolling around. And because of seeing them like rolling around, I just remember laughing, like a real childlike giggle. And that was basically all that flashback of this memory was. So like I said, I've drawn them and written as much information down about that memory, but I almost couldn't believe I'd forgotten that until recently.
Wow. That's a really cool memory. I'm just curious about how big were they, like in terms of inches, or if you could.
I've got a box of matches here, People in the UK will recognise this brand of matches. They're called the Original Cook matches. So they're like long matches. I would say as tall as this matchbox. Yeah, yeah. The Original Cooks matches, if you stood it up, they would be about that in height. So maybe 4 inches, maybe ish, something like that.
I'm really fascinated at the fact that they're kind of rolling around. I do think, based on what I've heard from a number of people who are in like contact or had memories of gnome stuff, is that the gnomes are kind of goofy. Like they're kind of silly.
And these were definitely like, even though they're sort of facial features, people would probably see them and think they still looked quite old, but they didn't have the big long beards. They just had sort of rosy cheeks and maybe sort of short stubbly short beards, and very much behaving, and to me the look of them in the face like they were very, very young, but with an old look still.
I recently went on Reddit and I put a post up on Ask Reddit, and I said, "What do you say to your children who have imaginary friends or see things like fairies?" You know, because Ask Reddit has a pretty big population of users. I think it's like the top 1% of Reddit subgroups. So at any given time, there's like 70,000 people online at Ask Reddit. You know, I think it's got like 6 or 7 million people in that subgroup. And so I'm trying to fish for people that are saying to me, "Oh yeah, my kids are seeing fairies all the time and won't stop talking about it." And then I'm trying to get low key, trying to get that parent to like let me interview their kid anonymously with the parent present for an episode.
Yeah.
Because I really do think that as a child, there's a type of uninterrupted quantum vision, or as the guy at my intro says, etheric vision, going on in kids. And how freaking cool would it be to talk to an age appropriate kid? I don't know, someone like on that threshold of maybe 7 to 11, who's like old enough to know what the difference between making stuff up and not making stuff up is. I mean, I've talked to some pretty sophisticated 7 and 8 year olds who, you know, I wouldn't like trust to vote or anything, but I certainly would leave alone with like cooking instructions to make a pot of Katie alone, you know, kind of thing, right? Like, so these aren't idiots. I would love to talk to a kid who's actively seeing them and not an adult like yourself who's remembering in the past, because I just think that would make for fascinating content. So if anybody out there listening does have a child who they're sure is seeing the Fae and is willing to let me do my gentle interview style with your kid, think about it, please, because I think that would be really interesting to know. Do you know what I mean? Like to just actually interview a kid who's currently seeing this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard before sort of like kids and animals obviously are more open to seeing them. And this was just a little thing that I heard once, and I thought, oh, that's quite interesting actually. It's because obviously when you're a child, you're still, oh, how do I put it? You're more close, not to death, but that place where we come from and where we potentially go back to that place. You're more sort of closer to that, and that's why we're able to see these things more. Same as if anyone has sort of like I don't mean to just be all doom and gloom, it's not like that, but like a near-death experience or something like that where it opens that part up again.
Interesting insight, because like childhood is almost its own liminal experience in a way. Yeah,
That's what I mean. It's that sort of, it's those in-between places. You have to have dark and light and everything. Like there's a balance. But it's that in between, isn't it? And that's for me. Like I mean, I still, throughout my life, I have seen and heard and smelt things And obviously, as a teenager, I did go through that phase of sort of being scared of it a little bit, embarrassed by it, and just wanting to fit in with everybody else and just be normal. And I sort of closed it down. And as I briefly mentioned earlier, I did have like some trauma, some traumatic things happen, and I think that closed it down even more. But I've always had a love of anything fairy, like art, books, figurines, anything with a fairy on it or in it. So I think I had that connection still there a little bit. But it's only as I've aged, actually, that I've allowed it to come fully back in to my life. And obviously, we're talking some years ago now, but it's almost like it's come back full force now. And I do have sort of experiences on a fairly regular basis, to be honest. And sometimes I can just be out walking a dog and something will happen. And sometimes I won't necessarily see them with my physical eyes. I call it my inner eye. I'll see them, I'll sense them and feel them, that they're definitely there. But I won't necessarily see them, but I'm seeing them with my internal eyes. And one of my favourite fairy artists of all time, that obviously listeners will probably know, is Brian Froud. And I've got a book, one of his books, up on the shelf, and there's a quote in there that always fits with me. And again, when you're talking about fairies see the heart of a person, there's a quote where he says, I might be quoting this just slightly wrong, but you see fairies through your heart, or like through your heart space. You connect with them there. That's where they can connect with you easier. So I don't know, it just all seems to fit somehow.
This is a fascinating discussion, I've got to say. Also, something I forgot to say earlier, which I will say now. Thanks for your empathy around the stuff that happened to me. And I'm also sorry to hear that you've gone through some traumatic stuff. I just wanted to say that. It's truly something that doesn't escape almost anybody. Just about every single person I know has got something back there that they could refer to. So
Yeah.
My sentiments to everybody. I'm sorry, everybody, that we live in a place that produces so many traumas. We're working on fixing that little by little, if for nothing else, by doing these episodes. Yeah, I kind of agree with you that like there's a flow from childhood that, kind of maybe seems to be moving away from that type of vision. And then there's a flow that almost like as you start to age towards death, especially near death, whether that's a sudden near death or near death because of age, that type of like the woman who's talking about the owl in relation to her mother, that stuff is hard to dismiss as being a clear signal that there's a type of human interface with the spiritual that also means that human heart or human intent can manifest in reality-based experiences, in effect. Which really brings you back to like the idea of careful what you wish for, you just might get it. Or maybe more appropriately, like careful what thoughts, feelings, words, and other stuff you hold inside of yourself. I'm guilty of this all the time. My inner dialogue sucks sometimes.
Yeah, mine definitely does sometimes as well.
It's everybody's, I think.
Yeah.
But going back to children, they don't quite have that. I truly do know that kids don't have that. It only kicks in at a certain age when you start to get that combination of like, life is fucked, I'm aware of myself in relation to others kind of stuff. But as a smaller kid, your heart is quite pure. And I do think this is why the Fae, like you're saying, if what you're saying from this quote is accurate, know you through your heart space, would suggest why the children have that access. I think what's going on is like it's intact when you're a kid, it's all there, and then you learn to push it away. So you physically turn it off because of conditioning and because it's not encouraged. And so it atrophies like any other unused function or of the body, is what I think.
Yeah.
That's what I truly think. I think I think if you could get a generation of kids and not interrupt their quantum vision, you would have a generation of people living full time with the Fae, which would be like in olden times when there wasn't such a industrialized education and production system in societies, aka like the good old days of folklore when everybody did see these things all the time. You know, before some sort of institutional religion or institutional social structure like a school basically changed society away from truth to its own desires, which in this case is to become a society of production where you as an individual live in an economy, not in a community. Going back to what you said, you know, about how we're spiritual beings.
Yeah.
I think there was once a society on Earth that was fully articulated spiritualism everywhere. The animals were totally animistic. The interactions between all these interdimensional things we're talking about were present. I do think that happened in a prehistory or a perhaps forgotten or suppressed history time in human existence. What do you think? Do you think that's real? Do you think we had it more open and actually taking place once?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I just think, I don't know, like more and more people are starting to I know it sounds really cheesy and corny because that's probably what a lot of people say, but I do think there are a lot more people waking up to that again. And I think we've got to really, in my opinion, we've got to wake up to that more, because we all sort of know where things are heading if we don't, destroying the planet and all the greed and the hate and pain and everything that human beings are capable of doing.
It is funny, like there's a lot more support, it seems, for building tanks and bombs than it is for saving sacred nature, and maybe wondering if it's even more sacred than we think. Which to me is like, if you're alive and you find yourself alive and you look out the door and you're like, where do I live? Do I live in a garden or a battlefield? I mean, you know, my empathy to people stuck in cities right now. But I mean, if you look out your door most places and ask yourself, do I live in a garden or a battlefield? Earth's a garden. It's not a battlefield. It's been made to be a battlefield by a bunch of fucks. And that's just the truth. That's not me. That's not you. I wouldn't end up doing, I say that, but you follow the stories of how some people become, you know, negative leaders, and you realize like the human condition is within us all. But my point being is that it is and does take a degree of bravery, more bravery, to say fairies are real, stop cutting down those trees, stop eating those animals. It takes more bravery to do that somehow in this crazy fucked up world than it does to say, hey, I'm mad at those guys. Can we get a bunch of fucking bombs and tanks to go kill them together? Yeah, fuck yeah, let's go do that. That's got all the support in the world. But if you say to people, hey, let's stop killing each other, let's like go see what's sacred and magical about the forest, let's put the same amount of resources into that as what we just talked about, and people will look at you like there's something wrong with that guy. That guy's a lunatic talking about fairies. Where's his real world perception? Let's fucking pass me another bullet. You know what I mean? We got problems to solve. I humbly suggest that the solution to the problems will never be at the end of a gun, will never be within violence. They will only and ever exist in a place of love. You have to find your way to, this is kind of interesting because it goes back to where we started. You do have to find a way to accept responsibility for all the traumas even the ones that are seemingly random. And you have to, the ultimate responsibility is for you to put the trauma to rest. Like, you have to be where it stops. I use the analogy, you got to jump on this grenade yourself. You got to stop it from getting out into your relationships, into your community. And, you know, I've been guilty of yelling at X, Y, and Z because I'm feeling all fucking mad myself. The delivery guy, the whatever, the person on, you know, kept you on hold for 45 minutes at the cell phone company. We've all done it. And it seems like, oh, that's like no big deal, but it's actually the root kind of emotion behind what leads people to dropping bombs on one another in kind of this wholesale warfare. So, you know, it just does start and stop with each of us to find a way to get back to love and rallying in community, which is interesting about the cards you pulled, you know, because rallying in community around this topic matter is extremely tiny, it seems like, in a way. Like, it's not as big as I think it should be, given the fact that fairies are real. Like, given the fact that they're real, it should be huge.
Yeah. And I think but that's why it's so important that we do keep talking about it and sharing. And for me as well, like when you were talking about the bravery about opening up and sharing and talking about it, it is quite brave. And I think there's something to do with the fact that it's fairies, it's fae, that people are still, I don't know, much more reluctant to believe in that than if it was even Bigfoot, or you've seen a Roman centurion ghost walking through a wall of an old, an old building. It's like people are more accepting of those sort of spiritual encounters than a fairy. And I don't know whether it is because of the childlike connection to it still. But I think that's not a very old image of the Fae. Like, I think it was like the Victorians, I think, wasn't it, that created the little winged Tinkerbell type fairy, whereas before that they were very much real beings that people dealt with in their daily lives, and they were almost all feared a little bit.
Well, they're a lot more sophisticated and capable than we are. I can't, for instance, orchestrate that workflow of events that started this conversation. I couldn't do that. I can't make digital parts of another person's computer across the planet show up to reflect my numerology like this 156 character did. So, I mean, that's extremely feared. It's for most people to think about a interdimensional fae that's real, that knows your heart. And I agree with you resoundingly, Emma, that it's the hardest paranormal topic to broach and to talk about. And people will readily agree that you saw a UFO and listen. They will readily be interested to hear about the ghost you saw one time or 5 times, whatever. But you start talking about fairies, and it's interesting. You know, I've had people that I love and care about really honestly look at me like they're worried about my well-being when I tell them what I'm doing with my time these days.
Yeah, I know the feeling. But I'm also really surprised, because that's what I was just about to say as well. Well, it was on the same thought about how important it is to talk about this stuff and share it and connect with people, because I've actually been really surprised at how many people I've mentioned this to, or different experiences, and they've all of a sudden, and it's quite often it's been people that I wouldn't ever think would have this reaction, but all of a sudden their faces have lit up a little bit, and you can really see them thinking about what I'm saying, and then they will then go on and tell me, well, actually, I think I've seen something like that before, and they'll tell me an experience that they had, and it's definitely a fairy. It's definitely on the same vein as what I've just told them, but I would never in a million years have thought of them experiencing anything like that, and certainly not talking about it, but almost because I've opened up, it then allows them to open up to me about it. And that is happening actually more often than not now. Like, the more I talk about this and the more I've accepted that, to me, the fairies are real and they always have been. They're just part of my very being almost. They've always been there. The more I'm opening up that part of myself, it's almost like I say sometimes it's catching. Once you say, the fairies know you see them, they see you as well. That's how I feel. And then that opens that up for that person. And then it goes on. So it goes on. But I definitely think that once you see them, they see you right back. That's it. And it's having that, or retaining or reclaiming, as what I've thought of it, as that pure essence of yourself. Because even though we grow and we have all these experiences in life that can change us, for the good or the bad, it's reclaiming that sense of wonder at life. And it's always there, but we have to, in a way, we have to choose to see it in the world.
I think it's the single gift of magnitude that the Fae across all instances seem to be giving people, which is the gift of fascination.
Yeah.
Hence the name of the show.
To slow down and actually see what is there. I mean, it's like numerous times I've had people, I don't know, say I've saved a bee from drowning in a pool of water, and I'm thinking, there's been numerous people that have walked right past that bee and not even noticed it. And I know we all do that. I definitely would do it as well, but I do try to always just pay attention to the world around you and how much life and soul there is around you everywhere. And yeah, so I did save the bee from drowning, and other people didn't see it. And I think there's something in that as well. Like, you have to be a little bit slower, if you know what I mean, mentally or whatever, to see these things, be aware of them, to hear them properly.
I think it's a feedback loop of a sorts too. I'm learning that as you give into it, like as you stand and look at your forest and say, "Hi, fairies," the likelihood that they're gonna, because again, they're real, the likelihood that they're going to hear you and respond improves as you acknowledge and give that little bit of belief back to the equation, like a recipe. I've said before, like, they'll put 9 pieces of the game in the box and you have to put the 10th piece in, which is your belief. Yeah. And then the game is on. They really, they'll put the board out, they'll get all the dice ready, they'll put all the whatever fangle angles that the game has all set up for you, but you do have to sit down and play. It doesn't just happen. I mean, you listened to the gnome named Grimble Grumble. What happened when you were listening to that episode?
Oh, well, obviously you were talking about these glitches and stuff, and it just, I was at work actually while I was listening to that, and I don't even know if I've mentioned to you before, but I've always worked with animals from a rescue. First of all, it was rescue. So like here in the UK, we have the RSPCA, which is basically the place where animals that have been abused go. They get taken away, they get removed. So I did that for quite a long time, and then that started to affect me mentally because it was really traumatic. And for the last 10 years, I've actually been running my own business doing pet sitting and dog walking. So I'm still working with animals, but it's on a much nicer level now, where I just look after them when people go on holiday. So I was in one of my regular customers' homes looking after their pets, and I had your podcast on, and I was obviously working, and the phone was just playing on the counter. And as you were talking, and obviously these glitches, I was thinking about just sort of how they, to me, obviously they can affect gadgets and gizmos because everything's energy. And then it made me think of, if you watch a ghost investigation program, or they'll suck the battery life out of cameras, and then it made me think of UFOs will affect car batteries, car headlights. And I think all of these experiences, whether it's Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, whatever, they're all part of the same thing. I don't get to know, I'm not claiming to know how, but it made me think of that. So I was sort of deep in thought, listening and thinking these things. And honestly, as I was walking, so basically this customer's house, they have the front door, a big long hallway, and it leads directly to the kitchen, which is where I was at this time. And I was bagging up some rubbish, and I was walking from the kitchen through the long hallway to the front door so I could go and put the bin out and like put the rubbish out in the bin outside. And as I got almost to the front door, there were, and this was bare feet, Jim. This was not an animal. This was bare, small feet on the hard wooden floor behind me, went and ran, like something ran after me or with me as I walked down that hallway. But it was obviously as you were talking about them crossing over through gadgets and affecting things, and I don't know, and it was almost as if it made me jump for a second, and it was almost as if I could just see in my mind's eye a little person, like a little man. It felt male. And obviously I stopped in my tracks and was like, hello. And I didn't get any answer. And then I actually tried to recreate it, in case it was like the floorboard squeaking or I knocked something because I went past, but nothing sounded like that. And at the time there were no animals in the house either. The cat was out in the garden with the hens. So, but it was that it never happened in there before, and it was at that exact moment as you were talking about the song appearing and all of that. It was very strange, and it was bare. It was bare feet, 100% bare little feet on the floor. And it was so clear, Jim. I literally went, oh, for a second, like that.
As you were telling me, I felt it, and I want to tell you what I think, and it might sound really, really weird. It sounds probably super weird for me to even go ahead and say all this. For everyone listening, again, I'm just a guy who saw a fairy one time. I'm like way past the deep end of the pool without my without my kickboard. You know what I mean? Like I've been blindfolded and spun around that I will never hit the tail on the donkey, but this is what I think. So for everyone who might not have listened to the full catalog, you should. This will help you connect the dots. I think that Jem is living in a place that is an interdimensional portal for Fae. And I think that Jem with a G and all of her gems, because she's got a huge crystal collection, had her gold ring from her husband, so another G, stolen by Grimble Grumble. So Jem and her gems with a gold ring stolen by Grimble Grumble. And then he and the other Fae in her garden chose her because Fae can see your heart. Similarly to how, if we're going to go with the theme of this episode, I've been chosen to be a liminal thing, and the Fae actually are the owners of this show. That sounds weirdly cocky or something. I don't even know how that lands, but let's just go with it. Just go with it for the sake of, hypothesis and open discussion anyway. Because I do think that sometimes and other times not. Obviously, I'm the one clicking the mouse, but, it does feel weird, like the way we started. But anyway, just to connect this all. So I think that Grimble Grumble is a real gnome. And I think that he's been popping through and residing at Gems in the UK, where he's from. I furthermore think that Pink Floyd met him, which is why he's in the song The Gnome, which is a song from their first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Yeah.
Let the goosebumps from that one hit you. So The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. There they are again. Grimble Grumble, last song on the album. Real Gnome, encountered by Pink Floyd, documented in the song. The song says, I'm just going to paraphrase it because I don't want to sing the whole song, but the lyrics are on the web and on my website. Little gnomes live in their home, biding their time, eating and drinking their wine. And then one day, hooray, a brand new way for gnomes to say, ooh-wah. And the ooh-wah goes on to basically talk about a brand new way for gnomes to say, look at the river, isn't it good? A brand new way for gnomes to say, look at the sky, isn't it good? This is my interpretation. Grimble Grumble's a real gnome. He originally, he's like, gnomes live for hundreds of years, is what I've been told by a number of offline guests. So he's an old dude, but he's a real gnome. He is originally encountered by Pink Floyd, who recorded the song A Gnome Named Grimble Grumble. Because the Fae would appear, at least to me, speak in nattering alliteration. It's all they talk in. That's why everything in this show is Fascinating Fae. All the episode titles are you get it. You get the idea. So Grimble Grumble steals gold from Gem to give it back. To gesture, to bring about a lesson, to get Gem talking and capturing the gnomes on her Ring camera. And then one day, a brand new way for gnomes to say, ooh-ah.
Yeah. But it makes so much sense.
So not only did Grimble Grumble show up to Pink Floyd, they're all of the Fae, it would appear, are like omnipotent viewers, meaning time doesn't really seem to have the same linear structure to their viewpoint, which is why he knows. And then one day, a brand new way for gnomes to say, ooh-wah is going to pop up. Gem's now capturing them. Gem's now talking to me. The actual capture of the gnome on camera, the actual distribution of those images, the discussion with me, he is actually moving out from her garden through that process physically.
Oh, you there? Oh, the sound went for a little bit there.
That's him saying hello. No, for real, because we've been crystal clear this entire time.
You just cut out when you said that's how he's getting through.
He's moved out from an original ring. Well, actually, here's the workflow. So he's been coming out through the portal in Gem's garden along with other Fae, because Gem, like many guests on this show, like you and I are talking about, are a type of conduit of sorts. If I'm to say that I'm a liminal space and the Fae are working through me, it sounds so honestly gross to say that. Like, I don't know. I just feel like
No, I think it's like a channel. That's what I think it is. It's a channel.
But that's what I think. If I'm gonna allow for Danielle to be doing it, if I'm gonna allow for Brett and others to be doing it, then maybe I'm doing it too, is the tentative toe that I'm dipping in. But again, I'm just telling you what I think is actually going on. I think that Grimble Grumble's real. I think that the Fae around Gem's garden and Gem, and even Gem herself gives this mention where she's like, I don't even know how I got into all these gems, and it's just so weird. I wasn't always like this. And everything about like what we're talking about somehow the Fae seeing your heart, somehow the Fae choosing you, liminal times being good or badly produced can be a time where they can work through, liminal spaces being a space they can work through. All of this leads me to believe quite confidently, and again, just going to what you just told me about happening when you listen to the Grimble Grumble episode and other things, and we'll talk about William here in a second, who came next and had his charger stolen, which is a crazy cap to put on this, but I do think that gnome caught Jem's attention with those pumpkin seeds and initially took her ring for a long period of time in advance of returning it to really cement the severity of the lesson so that it would become utterly unmistakable to her, the return after 3.5 years to such an obvious place.
Yeah.
This is all, like I said, they're great playwrights. So I do think that Grimble Grumble either knew precognitively that there was a time in which technology would evolve to the point where the Fae could actually, and then one day a brand new way for gnomes to say, and that through the act of being captured and showcased and talked about, and then subsequently my openness and the channel that happens through my show effectively gave him an even wider source of distribution for himself. And I do think he's exploring the world in part through every time someone listens to that episode, and also in part every time someone watches a Gem video, because either or gives him access to your device and therefore access to the rest of the world.
Yeah, because again, I think it's just like humans are evolving with technology, aren't they, really, as well? So yeah, it makes sense. It's the energy as well, opening the channel up. And the words have power. So I think listening to people telling their stories so openly and connecting and sharing, again, it's all energy, isn't it?
I agree. And I've struggled with how does a computer and a fairy interface a lot, but I think I've resolved it quite to my satisfaction, maybe not to everyone else's, but here's where I'm at. Like a computer operates at the end of the day on a simple tabulation of ones and zeros, right? So how does like a 1 and a 0 become an image? Well, like, you know, all pixels have a value, red, blue, green, blah, blah, blah. You can assign a numeric value to those pixels, and a 1 and a 0 could eventually add up to the numeric value of any pixel. And so therefore, like all computation, everything is just ones and zeros. And those ones and zeros in a computer are achieved by positive and negative storage of electrical charge. A positively stored charge is a 1, a negatively stored charge is a 0. And in your chip, there's like a mind-boggling array of potential positions for those electrical charges to exist in this solid piece of matter. But that solid piece of matter is stuff that got dug up out of the ground and formed into that superstructure that I'm talking about that can hold a memory of all those charges being, you know, in their place, aka ones and zeros. So therefore, I mean, if you're just talking about energy just purely like as electricity, and if like light hitting photosynthetic plants is ultimately like an example of transmutation of one form of energy into another, which it is, because, you know, then it becomes like a sucrose energy in the plant that we can eat, for example, or the plant can use, and it does that out of what was once a photon. Then I do think that, like, yeah, they can change the phase state of a positive or negative charge very, very easily. That's something that I don't think is hard for a energy-based being to do. And therefore, as Liz said, it can take them a while to get to know a new device. Meaning, like, she was talking about like how she actually has like started taking pictures with a new camera and it hasn't been working, and then only to find like after a period of time it does. I feel like at this juncture, Grimble Grumble and all Fae who might want to have like an open door to my computer, because the stuff that this machine does is beyond Banana Town. And it does it in direct correlation to Fae interviews starting for this show and basically at no other time. So I don't really talk about this, but I'll tell you now, and therefore tell the audience. I replaced my glasses that were moved by the fairy. I bought a whole bunch of new ones from Zenny Optical. And I also replaced my ball mouse, because just having those two objects around that moved when I was talking with Danielle is like too fucking much for me.
Too much.
They're in a box in a drawer at the bottom of my stuff, but I could not handle them anymore. I certainly couldn't put those glasses on my face. It was too much. I was like, these are objects that a fairy touched and moved, and I don't know if I even want them anymore. It's too much. But yeah, that seems like one thing, like moving a pair of glasses. Okay, that's a physical stationary object. But then like making all these different things happen with my audio settings, that's a different thing. That's a computer, right? One is one and the other is the other. I guess what I'm getting back down to is that if the electrons and, let's just say the particles and matter that make up my glasses really, in a quantum physics perspective, are really just vibrating and are basically a form of frequency, or AKA energy, and these guys are too, then them reaching over and picking up a solid object, which is really not solid, it's actually just energy, AKA my glasses, totally understandable. But by the same measure, going back to and then one day a brand new way for gnomes to say, I think that all Fae are learning technology. And I think that this show is like a chronicling example of the power of that. And they do it in the Fae way, where it's playful. You could almost pass it off. Any objective listener could just say, I'm making this all up, and that I spoofed those screenshots and I'm a great on-the-spot actor or something. But I mean, no, it's capturing the real emotion and the astonishment at the beginning of this show that you and I were enraptured by. And I'm still scratching my head as to what the heck is going on with number 1, 5, and 6. I'm really scratching my head about your cards not being at the top of the stack.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if you can hear banging. My cats wanted to come in the room and they're both...
It's cool, yeah. But actually that's maybe the perfect spot, is like right there. Computers and your cards are just like my glasses and the computer.
Yeah.
It's the same. We are actually being force-fed the story. Are we listening?
Mm-hmm.
Is everyone listening?
Pay attention. We are here.
Hi, Fascinating Fae fans. Are you listening? Are you among the many people who are sitting there wondering if they should write me to talk about the weird stuff that's been happening since they've been listening to this show? Does anybody else out there fully agree with Emma that aliens and fairies and Bigfoot and ghosts and interdimensional ecosystem soup is totally a thing? And that they suck batteries dry? Ron, my very first guest, Emma, in an offline conversation told me that fairies are the ones sucking the batteries dry, and that, you know, by that measure, Bigfoot's a Fae, which I kind of think he is.
Yeah, I definitely think. And I think as well, that's why people don't see them all the time. And when people go out looking for them, they're not finding them, because sometimes they're not actually physically in this dimensional space. They go in and out.
Well, there's all these orb connections to Sasquatch, and the woman from Australia is totally convinced that the orbs are a type of interdimensional vehicle that transports souls of all types.
And I can't help sometimes but wonder, I mean, I've heard lots of stories about people disappearing, sort of like in front of other people sometimes as well. And it's like, what is that about? How can someone just disappear in front of another person? Or, you know, perfectly trained professional hikers and backpackers that go off to a place where they've been numerous times before, and then suddenly they don't come back. Obviously, there could be a perfectly rational explanation for it. But some of the stories I've read, I'm like, well, how do we know that they're not accidentally walking through one of those portals or one of those energy spaces through the veil, almost, to the other side, and getting lost or taken? Could be taken even.
I do think people are taken. I do. And I do think you can get lost. I have a guest upcoming who is very hard to get on this show, but I will nail them down for it, I'm sure, who tells a very compelling story to me that I want to get into audio, of going into the woods on a very familiar trail, something they've done at least 14 times over 9 years. This is a consistent, like, big part of summer for this person, right? And at one time, going through this, I'm getting goosebumps because it's such a crazy story, but they went through the trail sequence and then found themselves lost for no reason. Like, they know they didn't leave the trail, they knew they were on the trail, but things were no longer right. And they went to double back, and then as they were doubling back, got even more confused because now they were retracing their steps, but this was not where they had just been.
Yeah.
And this person describes, like, utter horror, thinking they'd lost their mind, not sure what the hell was going on. Ultimately did get back out from there and describes in detail how that process worked and what the fairy realm was like. And I do think that is one potentiality. I think with Bigfoot, I think they can take people.
Mm.
There's very good there's very good evidence collection by Wes Germer at Sasquatch Chronicles, my podcast hero, around this. And he also talks in his own way, he calls them the lights, where he says, a lot of people who see Bigfoot also see the lights. And I think what he means is the orbs. And I think that this might sound even more out there, given that I just said that I think Grimble Grumble's real and he's moving out through technology and sound and imagery to explore the world. But I really do think that's happening. And I think he chose Jem specifically to initiate that process. And you can believe it or not, but go listen to that episode for yourself and tell me if anything weird happens. Anyway, I just think that when Bigfoot moves around as an orb, it's not unlike a yogi moving around as a projection in an astral travel kind of situation. Or as Liz describes it in Australia, she says, some orbs look like the kangaroos. Some orbs look like other plants. Some orbs look like the birds. Like she said, I can hold up pictures of deceased loved ones and show you their face in orbs. I've got orbs that are 50 faces. I've got orbs that are animals that are also another animal. And, she's got some really compelling photography. There's a type of Australian eagle, and she's got an orb that looks like an eagle looking over its right shoulder, and it's remarkable. And, I just think that maybe, going back to many of the themes we've touched on, and again, I don't know any of this stuff at all. This is really just a privilege to get to muse around in my head, but maybe we all of us are way less physical than initially appears. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is why there's such an enormous impact from every little thing that happens to us. Because I don't know about everyone else listening, but I feel like I'm like a deeply emotionally and energetically impacted person by most things in my day. And I kind of think that maybe like human beings, animals, plants, all quote unquote alive things, because I'm actually starting to wonder if the rocks and the raw materials that went into my computer don't contain a type of life too, if they're able to participate in the game. But anyway, all these alive things I think can go orb. I kind of think we can all just go orb.
Yeah,
that's what I think. I don't think it's unique to Sasquatch or Fae. I kind of think that like in our dreams, maybe we go orb sometimes, and maybe that orb form, because Liz talks about this, is really strong. Like it's an oval, like an egg is strong. It's like strong and it's slippery and it's easy to hold as a mental conjuring, whereas our physical selves are a very complicated thing to hold as a mental conjuring. And that it can be used, the orbs are used like a vessel in a sense to move between these dimensional spaces, these quantum planes, these liminal spaces, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the right name is, but you get the idea. What do you think? I mean, have you ever seen an orb or thought much about the orbs in that way? I'm just curious as we're talking about them here in relation to kind of like what you said about batteries being sucked, and are all these energy things the same? I guess what I'm asking is that if so, and if what Liz is saying, that she sees all things represented in orbs, including, she says, alien like entities represented in orbs, do you think that maybe we're all a type of spirit in a type of spirit holodeck or something? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen orbs. I've seen them with the naked eye as well. Not just looking through cameras or anything. And you can 100% tell the difference between like an insect or a bit of dust, or they have their own light source and they move differently, in my opinion, and the colours are different. I've seen ones with little tails almost, as well as they move. They almost sort of look like an asteroid or something like that, or a firework. They've almost got these little tails coming off them. And I mean, I've seen a huge one, huge. It was the best way I could sort of describe what it looked like, but it was green. This was when I was a teenager. Was one of my all-time favourite films, The Wizard of Oz. You know, the good witch, Glinda, when she appears in that big pink bubble, and then she like, has her form appear. But that's what I'm thinking as well, is that's how she travels from place to place and moves around the environment. The solid environment, the physical environment, is through this orb-like shape. And I think perhaps that's what part of that is as well, is just a way of moving around from place to place quickly.
I agree. And actually, it's so funny because like I feel like Ron, by the way, I'll let Ron tell this in his own words, but Ron in another offline conversation told me, sorry it's so hard to hear me, I'm a reincarnated gnome. And if you think about having struggled to listen to that episode before I gave it an AI treatment, and even after the AI treatment, you can hear the gnome in Ron's voice.
Yeah.
He actually says a lot of people are reincarnated Fae in human form. He said like a lot. You'd be shocked at how many people walking around don't know that they're the soul of various Fae in human form.
But there's also tales I've read about human beings like interbreeding with Fae type beings, and that there being fairy blood in certain people as well.
Well, Ren from My Kentucky Kin Kidnapping talks about his cleft palate, which is traditionally associated with children born of the Fae, and then undergoing regression hypnotherapy where he encounters Fae that activate fairy DNA and activate wing implants in the back of his shoulder blades.
Wow.
Which is like wild to consider. And in that encounter, there's a clear presence of a crystalline spacecraft, aka aliens. In the logo for the show, it's kind of like an orb slash UFO beaming up or down a frowning Sasquatch surrounded by a bunch of Fae. If you look at the logo for this show, and if you haven't really looked, you should check out the frowning Sasquatch because he's really cute. He's sad. And the reason he's frowning is because he, like me, just has no fucking clue. So that's why the Sasquatch is sad.
But that's what I've always liked, that your logo as well, because that's sort of how I feel about all of these things. when people see ghosts or UFOs or whatever, cryptids, I think it's all part of the same thing. And when you experience something like that, it changes you. It does. It changes a part of you, and it's real, and you never forget the details, you never forget what happened. And it's almost like, again, this like inner knowing, you know what it was that you saw. You might not understand why or how you saw it, but it was real.
Everything you said there is 100% true. You may find yourself hosting a fairy podcast if you see one of these things. Watch out, everybody. You may also find yourself a guest on a fairy podcast, like our friend Emma here tonight. So, anything is possible. I want to ask a final question on this kind of topic thread, which was prompted by the thoughts I had during the quick break we took. And then I want to let you get back to telling your fairy encounters. You can tell us the ones you did tell to Claire if you want again, or you can tell us other stuff. It's cool. But here's a question that is recently kind of struck up in my mind, and I'm curious on your perspective as a person who's, more deeply into fairies than I am, for sure, and from the UK in addition to that. Folklore. You mentioned a moment ago at the kind of top of the show about how the Victorian era sort of what applied the kind of fairy wing, took them from something that was real and to be feared a little bit, I think is how you put it, into something more like a plaything, right? Folklore, when I read it a lot of the time, bothers me in the same way that I feel like this is all written in a type of fairy tale-esque package, for lack of a better word. Not that words come in a package, but you get the idea. Do you think that the veil, this concept of the veil that keeps getting talked about, do you think that in part the veil was a co-creation of certain humans and fae, and that in part took the form of this Victorian redesigning of the fae and the fairy tale kind of, it's all for kids? Do you think that all that is in part an element of the veil? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so, yeah.
Like, I find that like folklore and fairy tales does not give justice to real quantum based entities that can like steal golden rings and take them and bring them back. I feel like that should be talked about in a more reverent kind of terminology than I usually find in at least modern day depictions of fairies, which is why people raise eyebrows when you tell them you saw a fairy,
yeah.
Right? Because it's the most taboo. So is the fact that fairies is the most taboo, is that kind of a psychological veil that was implemented? Like, did the fae decide to let themselves be known differently than they really I don't know if I'm giving it voice. It's like,
no, I do. I get what you mean. And there's tales I've read, like Irish, because my granddad on my mum's side, my mum's dad, he came from Tipperary in Ireland, and I've always wondered if that's where this side of me comes from, because I remember tales he would tell me. My nan had seen a fairy, and she 100% believed me when I saw one in her house and garden, which is on an episode of Claire's podcast. But again, I don't know, just something about that Irish ancestry that I feel is connected to it somehow. But I think like some of the stories he used to tell me, like I said, they were real and dark. And there's a book, Jim, by let me just grab it off the bookshelf, called Meeting the Other Crowd, and it is Eddie Lenihan, who he just basically is a folklorist in Ireland, and he just went round and he gathered fairy stories of hidden islands. So these were real people, sometimes in really small, isolated little villages, telling their fairy experiences. and there's some of the best stories I've ever read in there. And some of them aren't that nice. They're creepy or a bit dark. So yeah, I don't know. I just think when it comes to like how fairies have been sort of changed over time. I mean, that's it. I've just got back onto my thought process properly. But there's stories I've read in Irish folklore about big battles between the Fae and humans, and that the Fae retreated. They were like, we can't get through to you anymore. You're not looking after the planet and everything, and they just retreated like under the hills. That's how they became people of the forts and stuff like that, and the unseen. So I don't know if that's something to do with it as well. So yeah, like part of it is our fault that they didn't want to connect with us anymore, because I thought that. So I hope that makes sense. But I think it's like a sign of the times as well, for when the imagery of fairies changed a little bit. Modern technology or terms about, like you said, the quantum physics and all of that. It didn't exist then. So, and I don't know, maybe there was like, not quite Victorian, but around those sort of times, I'm thinking of like big wars and lots of losses. And so maybe they tapped into the more joyous side of fairies and made that more prominent.
I think there's like it's interesting, like as I say colonial or like human guilt, it reminds me of colonial guilt a bit. And I think this maybe brings me closer to better articulating my question, but I'm glad we talked in an open way, even though I couldn't really formulate my question correctly. Thanks for that. I think I've got it now, what I was trying to say. I think that in part, folklore is a collection of real information.
Yeah.
That's when I always say, is folklore really just a user's manual to life with interdimensional beings, right? Should we give it more credit? But I think that sometimes and this is what was kind of prompted by your talk about how the Victorians gave them wings and sort of made them more like a child's toy kind of thing. I think like in colonial guilt, there's this tendency to like repurpose the Indian, for if we're going to use North America, as an example, in this kind of like idealistic way. Oh, they were all really spiritual, this, that. It's kind of like repurposing what they just utterly destroyed and had no regard for. And after all that's done, they'll give it a little bit of respect. Like they'll let, like, for example, here in Canada, they'll often put a totem pole up in the center of town, even though the rest of town is totally colonized and like the natives are drunk on the street or otherwise not, in good shape. But there's still this kind of recognition a little bit of like, yeah, this is still, a native place. We're willing to give it a little bit of acknowledgement to soothe our guilt and to kind of make it look like we're woke. But in actuality, it's a type of subjugation to do that tokenism. And so part of folklore to me sometimes feels like it was written by people that are intentionally trying to diminish or I think the word is romanticize, and therefore trivialize a real thing. Much like you get the kind of like Tonto on the Indian plains with his feather headdress as a romanticized idealization of the first person, the native. It's kind of like the colonialist gets hold of the narrative and therefore writes the new perspective on what they just conquered. I wonder sometimes if folklore takes that shape where after we did beat the Fae out, or like you're talking about these huge battles, I'd be fascinated to learn more about that. For sure I would. If we then kind of rewrote the history books to make the Fae look like our little pets and something that's just kind of funny to both do what I'm talking about, that the colonialists do, like acknowledge, yeah, there were Fae, but
Yeah.
then to like totally basically just be doing tokenism or some. It's a type of psychological containment field, I think.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that before.
Partially, it really depends on what you're encountering,
Yeah.
because some of the stuff is good and I think wakes up old stories. Other stuff I think is like making Fae into Tinkerbell, for
Yeah.
example.
And there's a little part of me as well that thinks of, I don't know, I'm thinking of like Christmas, for instance. It's a pagan holiday originally, isn't it? Some saints and things couldn't be like some things remain sacred and they can't be completely rewritten and completely scrubbed out. So maybe that's,
Christmas is a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
yeah.
Perfect analog. Perfect analog. Yes.
So they couldn't completely get rid of fairies. They've changed it.
That's what I think. And that's why the vitriol when you bring them up. Like you're right bang on with Christmas. Honestly, you are understanding what I'm trying to say. Thank you for reflecting that back to me. That helped.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And like, I mean, we went to the Isle of She, I think it was called, in Scotland, which basically means Isle of the Fae. And my goodness me, that place was thick with fairy energy. But right near where we stayed, there was a little mound, really ancient, with this really ancient standing stone on the top of it. And obviously a sacred place that's been worshipped for thousands of years. And there was a church built right next to it. Right next to it. Yeah. And I think they couldn't scrub that belief completely away. So they left that stone there, but they knew it was a sacred place and built a little church there as well. So people would,
I do think that like there's a human tendency to build over the ruins of what we just conquered, because there's exactly what I'm talking about. We know it's special, and we feel a little guilty / like we're trying to take it for ourselves. It's very complicated, the human condition.
yeah.
Christmas is a good example because it's actually meant to be a celebration of the return of the sun, which is clockable. To the 21st, it's at its lowest point of the year, and by the 24th, it's starting to visibly come back, which is, all things tied in, like the rebirth of Christ, Christmas, Christ itself. It goes like down this huge, long rabbit hole if you really look into it.
Yeah.
All the way back to more or less sun worship, within Egyptian subcultures even. But then fast forward today, you've got Coca-Cola Red Santa, Christmas, Boxing Day sales. It's a totally different meaning. But like you said, they couldn't quite extinguish what's real about it.
Yeah.
Which is actually, it is a time to celebrate the return of the sun being like the figure replacement for the Son, aka the Father, the Holy Son.
Yeah, they just made it a different sun. Yeah.
Precisely. They just literally and I just think that in Fae information, it's a minefield of the exact same type of Christmas maze we're talking about, where it's a overlay of real things that have then been subjugated, rewritten, repurposed, culturally appropriated, or just downright intentionally obscured. All of the above and more, but overlaid on top of the superseding truth. Like Christmas is a real celebration of a real astral phenomena observed for millennia. Fae are real. And I do think that the two kind of like, because Christmas is just like a kid's holiday now, not a real pagan worship time, and the Fae suffer the same exact diminishment and fate in our modern take on things. This has been a really cool philosophical discussion, but I feel like I've talked too much and that we have stolen away from time about your encounters. So forgive me for that, Emma.
Oh no, it's been wonderful. I think it's all been naturally spoken.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I feel the same way. I just, I want to try a little bit with the show to keep on format so that, the audience, mostly out of respect for your time and the audience's time more than anything. So, may I ask you to tell me about the time you did see a fairy in your mother's house that you did tell to Claire's? I wouldn't mind hearing it here again since you brought it up, if that's okay with you.
Oh yeah. It was my well, what I would call my nan, my grandmother. That's all right. My mum's mum. She's sadly passed away a couple of years ago now. And bless her, we miss her every day. But she had us grandkids quite a lot growing up, and her garden was so magical. It was just the memories of that place. It wasn't huge, but it always felt big, and it always felt so full of life and colour and scents. Like she had flowers blooming constantly. It didn't seem to matter what time of year it was. There was always flowers blooming and vegetables. She used to grow potatoes and runner beans. And there was always insects and birds and everything out in the garden. And we had like a playhouse in the shed and, different little bits like that. So there were so many memories, but I actually used to like spending time on my own with her there as well. So I'd go round when there was none of my cousins or my brother there. I just genuinely liked the company of my nan. And this one particular time I was sat out in the garden and she was in the house pottering around in the kitchen, probably making dinner or something like that. So, and it was a really hot summer's day, so she had these patio doors or French windows. They were open and there was a big net, like a net curtain, just sort of gently blowing in the breeze. And then the kitchen door was open and the windows were wide open. So I could hear, she had those, I don't know what they're called, but they're sort of like these plastic strands that you can hang over the door to stop flies getting in. And she had like a rainbow coloured set of those at the back door, so I could hear those blowing in the wind. And I was laying on this sun lounger, like reclining chair, and I think I must have been probably about 11 years old as well when this happened. And laying on the sun chair, and I was obviously thinking back, I think I was almost in some sort of like meditative state. I was so calm and peaceful, and I have honestly never felt like that again. It was just, and I wasn't asleep because I could hear all the, like I said, the background noises and bees buzzing around and whatnot. And it was warm, and the smell of the garden was really, really strong from all the flowers. And like I said, I was just sat in this zone for I don't know how long. And then eventually I opened my eyes and was just looking around, and it was so bright, like everything looked luminous in colour. And I just remember thinking, I need to go in now, like go inside. So I went in through the patio doors, which led directly into the living room. And I went and sat on a chair it was sort of to the left-hand side of the room, but I sat at the far end. So I was slightly facing left, looking towards the net that was blowing at the patio doors. And I don't know why, it was just like I was guided or whatever to go and sit, and I was just sat again with this really peaceful feeling, looking across at these patio doors. And the living room door was open to the kitchen, so I could still hear my nan pottering around in the kitchen. And all of a sudden I saw it with my physical eyes, but it didn't manifest into like a solid shape. But once again, that description I say of seeing it with your inner eyes, it's like I know what this being looked like, even though with my physical eyes I only saw it as like a shadow being, or like a silhouette almost. But I could see details of his clothing And in my mind's eye, I know what he looked like, even though I didn't see him as clear. But yeah, probably like halfway up the doorway, so it wasn't touching the floor, this being around the size of like maybe like a Barbie doll type, it just sort of in midair, floating in midair, appeared to come in through what I assume was from outside, like manifest into the doorway. And he had, I call him a pixie because that's the best description I can think. I didn't see any wings, and he had the hat and the cuffs around his neck and his sleeves, because it was a long sleeve like top that he had on. They had curls like bluebell petals. So if you imagine like the petals are unfolding, they have those little curls on the edge. They looked like that. And they matched. And then he had your typical pixie little curl-toed boots on as well. Again, with the same little cuffs around his the bottom of his trousers, like these little curled up bits. Yeah, and he just sort of glided in midair, floated there for a couple of seconds, and obviously I was gobsmacked at what I was actually witnessing. And literally within a split second, so he went from going really slowly floating in midair to really, really super quickly. He went to the right, so as he came in the door, he would have been moving to his left. He quickly shot down. My nan had this little child-size wooden table with a little chair that us kids used to sit at, and when it wasn't in use, obviously it was folded down because it was like a wooden table that folded out. So at the time it was folded down up against that wall, and I saw him really quickly shoot under that table, and I saw his fingers and his legs and his arms and everything moving as he swung down under that table and was reaching for the slats and the legs, and he like pulled himself along almost like monkey bars across the table, and then he shot out sort of floating in midair again, but really quickly, and he shot behind the TV stand. There was like the TV in the corner, and he just disappeared behind the TV unit. And for a couple of seconds I sat in the chair really taken aback, like, oh my goodness, what have I just seen? And then I thought, oh, go and see if he's still there. So I jumped up out the chair, ran across the room, looked behind the TV stand, behind the TV unit, and obviously he was gone. I didn't see anything. And again, I think I just stood there for a second, taking in what had just happened. And then I turned directly to my right, went straight out into the kitchen and said, Nan, I've just seen a fairy. And I'll never forget it. She turned around. She was sort of standing near the kitchen sink. She turned around, looked at me, and just said, well, aren't you a lucky girl? And then I told her what I'd seen and what had happened. And she just listened and totally believed me. And it was just really lovely. And then I'm trying to remember when it was I actually submitted that story. I wrote it out for the fairy census, and it was actually selected and published in a newsletter from the Fairy Investigation Society. And I was actually, obviously, and now it's in the fairy census if people want to read it. But I then was able to read that out to my nan again as an adult and share that story with her again, and she remembered it all. She remembered everything as I read it out. So it was really lovely to share that with her again and have it validated to me again as an adult. And obviously, like I said, especially since she's no longer with us now, it was just it made it more special, I think, than it already was, being able to talk about it again with her as an adult.
You know, like having it validated by the fairy census in a newsletter and then appear in the book is so validating and gives that perfect occasion for that repeat sharing and revisiting with your nan. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I have the fairy census, and I recently was sending it to some people in New York who contacted me and are interested in this show of all things, which is pretty cool. And I was like thinking as you were talking, I think I've read this or heard
Yeah.
I think and so that's why. You know, when you say they're kind of like a shadow person, I would agree. They're kind of almost on the verge of two-dimensional on visible sight. They're very, very flat, thin, kind of like hard to really put a traditional form to, but you're definitely seeing what you're seeing. They just don't look like other stuff looks.
And I could see the details on him. So it wasn't like he was completely see-through, but I couldn't see that, you know, like I didn't see details of his face or colours of his clothing or anything like that. But sort of, like I said, in my mind's eye, I know what he looked like because I could see him. I'm a little bit similar as well with the fairy market episode of Claire's podcast that I did, like the Goblin Market, I think she called it, because that's similar as well. Because obviously I only ever saw those, and they're all different shapes and sizes, different species. Because that's definitely what I know fairies are, almost like animals. It's like different species. But I know, even though I only ever saw them through the curtains, I could see details of their clothing, and I know what they looked like. Even though, you know, I'd creep out of bed and go over to the window and whip the curtains back really quickly to try and get an actual glimpse of them, and they wouldn't be there, just an empty windowsill. I know what they looked like, and I could see the details and the shapes and the silhouette as they moved.
I believe that many humans possess special capabilities, for lack of a better word. I think clairvoyance is the root term, and then people will say clairaudient or clairvisual, or like, so I think that's how that all works itself out. But it sounds a lot to me like you have that type of intact quantum vision still. And I do think that like seeing that degree of like because it's really interesting. Like I'm not the same way, but I've talked to others who describe very similar capabilities, and I do think that like the eye is on some level registering it, and the perception is just different. I don't know how else to really describe it, but I do think you're seeing what you're seeing in a real way, not necessarily through a telepathic capability. I do think you're seeing what you're seeing in a real way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because I think a lot of people struggle with this particular aspect of Fae encounters at times, where they can say, oh, you're just imagining. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think Emma's imagining. I think she's seeing what she's seeing, just seeing it in a different way than we might necessarily understand sight. And I think that would be true of other people that are muses through art, like Danielle, Brett, you know, Katie, others that I've spoken to here on the show. Even Frozen Wolf really is talking a lot about the clothing kind of details that you talk about, similar size with the blue man that appeared to her during the storm. There's a lot of similarities there, in fact. Yeah. And she drew a picture which is on the site, and he's got a remarkably similar fringed bluebell kind of arrangement to his cuffing, which I think is very interesting as well.
I mean, there's a being that I've seen him when I was little, and I've seen him quite recently again. A couple of times I've drawn him, and it's the same little being. So I wonder if he's like a little bit of a guide or something, because I do think that some of them come through maybe little bit like my mind's completely gone what the name of the gnome was. Grimble Grumble, wasn't it? Yeah. If he's like a bit of a guide, or if there's stronger ones that come through to try and connect with us again. Because I do wonder if there's sometimes, I have come across sort of Fae energy before, and it is not friendly. It does not want you to be there, and it does not want you to connect with it at all. And I think, well, you know, after everything, I suppose that human beings can be or have, if you know, if you think of the history of humans and fae, I can imagine why some of them probably don't want to talk to us. But then there'll be advocates, you know, like, no, come on, we need to talk to them again. And so maybe he's like that. And I do wonder if this little being that has come to me, I mean, I've drawn him, like I said, a couple of times in different places, and only recently I've put the dots together and thought, hang on a minute, this is actually the same. This is the same energy, the same being that's coming up time and time again. And he's been there pretty much since I was little with me.
I do think that's possible and a real occurrence for many, many people, that you have effectively house fae or personal fae.
Yeah.
I don't dispute that whatsoever. In fact, I wonder sometimes, you know, who that owl is. You know, like Grimble Grumble would be possibly the first fae that I say whose name I know.
Yeah. Well, I've recently drawn this little being, and I did get a name for him.
Interesting. What was the name?
Pipkin.
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 I was trying to see if 156 correlated to a word, and 1 is A, 5 is A, B, C, D, E, F, so AEF. I'm not sure if that spells a name or not. That would be what 156 correlates to in the alphabet if you were trying to do that, though, which is interesting. To kind of go back on a tangent there, I'll tell you what, I've really appreciated this episode and the way that it's flowed. And I know you've got a lot of fairy stories to potentially tell. I think what I'll do is save some of that for a part 2. I'm really into 2-part episodes these days because I don't want to rush these conversations. So just to kind of bring this one to a more focused close and keep it in that kind of 2-hour range with editing for the audience, which is, you know, I think a respectful amount of time. And I'm honestly amazed when I look at my statistics. I mean, almost everyone who does listen to this show listens to like the entirety of all the episodes. So thanks for that, everybody. That means a lot to know you spend 2 hours at a time with me and a guest sometimes. But with that, you know, said, and out of respect for your time here tonight, Emma, and the audience's time, if it's okay, I'll ask you some of my favorite wind-up questions as we go to kind of move towards the conclusion of the show. No real rush, though. So before I do that, was there any particular story that you were prepared to and wanting to get into tonight that we haven't had a chance to because of the way that the episode unfolded so far?
Yeah, really quick. This was an experience that only happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and I drew them, so I can send you the little sketch of them that I've done. And I actually saw these 2 fae on the backs of flies, and even me saying that out loud, saying I actually physically saw these with my naked eye. And it completely caught me off guard, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. But I was out with a dog working, but it's not really like a job, you know, because I love it so much. And I was out in one of my favourite places in the woods, and there's a river and everything. It's such a magical fairy place. But I wasn't thinking anything about much, really. I was just walking along, and the walk was nearly finished as well. We were nearly back at the main road. And all of a sudden, these 2, and I don't even know what they were the biggest flies I've ever seen, like a brown colour with bright red eyes, flying really, really quickly around me, around my head, and around me, to the point where I stopped and was like, oh, you know, get away. And then I realised that on each of their backs, there was these 2 tiny little figures, like one on each back, and they had little brown hats on, like dark green long sleeve tops, brown trousers. They were so obviously small, I couldn't see their proper facial features or anything. Both male, and they were, I mean, I called the drawing fly racers because it was literally as if they were just showing off and racing around on these flies, almost like they were riding them. Yeah, cowboys, like they were on horseback or something.
You know what's crazy is I've got another episode coming up where a woman describes watching Faye riding on the back of bunnies, and they very similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it snapped me out of, I don't know, just not really. I wasn't really thinking about anything. I was just walking. I knew that walk. I knew the dog, and I was obviously like probably not very present, really. Just sort of lost in my own head. And then that happened, and I was like, oh, okay. And they, like I said, they were small, but I could clearly see what they were, and they were just having the time of their lives. And like, it really made me laugh. And then obviously I carried on walking, and they just sort of stayed where they were in that same place. They didn't follow me or anything. I could still see them. And it just again became another one of those things where I was like, okay, that's just happened. That's another one I can add to the list of things.
The way you just put that there, that's another one of the things I can add to the list of things.
Yeah.
With a gentle little laugh. I think there's a little bit more going on with you than meets the eye, so to speak. So I appreciate your coy nature towards things. Not the least of which is your subdued astonishment at the misplacement of your cards, which is going to bring me to one of my wrap-up questions that I was saving for the end. I mean, at the start of this episode, you talked about the cards you pulled and that they were on the top of the stack. And I definitely have the audio, so it's obvious that you're confused as to why they're not there. But you're not as confused as I would be. Is it typical for things to move around in your house, would you say?
Not. That's a question. You've caught me off guard a little bit there. Because you know what it is? I think I'm so used to this stuff happening. It's just normal. It's just normal. Like I said, when I was younger, sometimes I used to get really frightened, and I used to be like, no, absolutely not. I can't entertain that. But now I just accept it for what it is. It's just like, oh, okay, that's a bit weird. That's just happened.
I'm really glad to talk to somebody that far along in their acceptance process.
Yeah.
Seriously though, I didn't, I think, mention it, but I alluded to it. William and his charger. I mean, he and I were trying to put the interview together. This is another Grimble Grumble tactic, I'm sure of it. G, the number 6 and the number 5 sure look a lot like the letter G too. Anyway, but free associations aside, sometimes following your intuition does not produce results, but it's good to go there sometimes too. When you're reacting to those cards moving, I mean, that's astonishing, but it's also in line with the Charger and William, because he's trying to come on the show. The Fae know he's trying to come on the show. They must know he's trying to come on the show. And he's going to talk about a childhood memory exclusively. But before he gets on the show, they take his charger from him while he's camping and bring it back to his house so that he talks to me about it during our episode. Not dissimilar to trying to start talking with you only to find I can't record you, to then, go through that sequence of events leading us to you pulling cards in direct correlation to the numerical value of the screenshot. It's so intense to think about how they do that to me. And I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Like, that's weird, right? That they moved those cards. It's strange.
Oh yeah. And there is still a part of me that goes, this is, for want of a better word, this is bonkers. Bonkers that happened? What's going on? But then I'm just like, oh, well, it's just the way it is. And sometimes, a lot of the time I'll laugh. But honestly, I've been sat in what I call my witchy room, but it's just a little room in the house where I've got all of my things basically, and I've got a wall of fairy art. Some of my favourite fairy artists are up there. But yeah, so no one else had been in here. I came in prepared to speak to you, shut the door, and thought, oh, I'll get my fairy oracle and draw some cards. And I purposely left them. I know I left them on the top so I could grab them when we started speaking. 3 cards, and they were no longer on the top. I had to literally look through the deck to find them when I know I'd left them on the top so I could grab them quickly.
So people decide to come on to Fascinating Fae to share stories and end up part of performance art directed and scripted by the Fae, basically, is the way that it seems to be unfolding over here at Fascinating Fae. Who would have thought? Truly remarkable. Thank you for confirming what I think is actually going on here. And it's just another tell. It's like, yeah, am I gonna pass off William and his charger? No, they did that too. Am I gonna pass off Gem and her wedding ring? No, they did that too. Am I gonna pass off Susan and the leaks getting planted? Nope, just as real. Hey, check it out. Glasses and a ball mouse moved in my house. I replaced them. This stuff is fucking bananas.
And, I hope I can still keep speaking, but something even stranger has just happened with these deck of cards again.
Of course you can keep going.
Something even stranger has just happened with this deck of cards again, because hang on, sorry Jim, I need to try and find where these cards are. Because I'm not even joking, I had left the deck of cards just on the floor next to me on the cushion, and the 3 cards that were out are no longer the same cards. There's 3 different ones. All the other cards in the box the backs were facing me, and the 3 that I'd left turned over, because that was the 3 that I've read, are different cards now. There's 3 different cards.
Let's hear them.
There's number 15, number 23, and number 20. Well, I don't know. I'm spreading the cards out on the floor. I can't even see them. Oh, hang on. No. I can't even see where they are.
Whoa,
So,
I feel like I'm about to float off the bed. I have so many goosebumps. Holy crow.
and this deck of cards is one that I use every day. Every single day. It's out on my little altar space. I put them back in there, Jim. Put them back in there, and it's just been next to me. Where are the cards? Oh, hang on, there's number 5. Right, I found them now, but they should not have been buried like that, because they were on the top. I'd put them back on the top. Right, okay, this is getting stranger now. Let's have a look really quickly, because I know I'm aware of the time.
No, this is totally trumped time. This is captivating. Let's keep going.
That has blown my mind more than just before.
I never like to rush these conversations. I just try to keep them to 2 hours for the audience. That's it. Honestly, that's the only factor. But this is way too cool to let go of. Let's keep going. So the 3 cards that were up are just different.
Yeah.
And the ones that were up are back
in the deck. They were still together as a 3, but they were right at the bottom of the pile.
Wow.
I've had to
I can hear all of that unfolding real time as we're talking.
I'm just picking the rest of the cards up now. That is completely, because the box had the lid on it and it's just been next to me on the floor. I know I always do the same thing. I always leave the drawn cards on the top, like in case I need to grab them again. That was the weirdest thing. My brain couldn't actually grasp what I was looking at. Different pictures, different cards. I was like, how is that different cards? Where's the ones that I'd picked? Right. Yeah. So that's a thing. That's just happened.
Fascinating. Will you read the contents of the new cards?
I will. So number 15, it's a little pixie type being fighting with a bumblebee, and it's number 15 and it's defense. This card asks you to take a defensive stance, be aware of your surroundings, take preventative measures and be prepared. You never know what lurks in the brambles. Smooth passing can be negotiated, perhaps not, but you have to be the judge. You have to be the judge. And this little guy is really making me think of Grimble Grumble, looking at him. Number 23 is the number, and he's called the Collector. And he's like a little gnome type character with a big feather sticking out of his hat, and he's got loads of necklaces and beads and things hanging around his waist that he's collected, and he's only got one shoe on. So it says, the collector knows what he wants to own. If he has come to you, be on the lookout for your next edition. Choose wisely, make sure this is something you desire, and above all, don't lose your shoe.
Wow. And the final card, if you would be so kind.
Is 20. And that is, 20 is demise. Another cautionary card. Demise warns you to watch your step. Be careful. Be mindful of your surroundings. Otherwise, you might meet your downfall. Oh. Yeah. And that is a picture of just like loads of different creatures tumbling around is what it looks like.
May I ask the name of our special guest that I can hear there?
Oh, that is my little cat, Phoebe. She's trying to get in the room again, but if she comes back in, she's just going to trample on everything.
How do you think those cards just got swapped to 3 different cards, Emma?
I honestly have got no idea. Some mischief is afoot, I think.
Well, that brings me to my next question as we go to move towards the end of this episode, this incredible episode. Gosh, I'm really appreciative of the fact that you've made so much time to talk with me here tonight. And that was just unbelievable what we just experienced there together. I kept feeling like I needed to ask you about the cards again, and look at what it produced.
I've got no explanation, honestly, as to how that has actually happened.
Well, the Fae can move stuff in your house, Emma. Yeah. That's how that happened.
And I don't feel funny about, although they sort of seem possibly a little bit more negative, don't they, those last ones?
I don't know that they seem negative as much as they seem like confirmatory.
Yeah, and just for me, I'm getting watch your surroundings, look at things that are around you, and
yeah, like I'm hearing that too. I'm hearing almost like I was asking you, well, is that unusual for you to have stuff move in your house?
Mm.
And here they are saying, watch, we're just going to move something right now. And
Yeah.
yes, it's exactly on flow. They're very good script writes.
Mm-hmm.
You feel me? They're like they should win a Pulitzer.
And the images on those cards are jumping out so much as well.
There you go. So I think it's a signal not of negativity, but of firm voice saying, Emma, yes, 100% real, my friend. We're 100% real. That's what I hear that.
Yeah.
Put aside those doubts is equally replaced for watch where you're, looking careful what you wish for.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the same theme, basically. And, like when I started this, I was looking for confirmation that people saw something else like what I saw. I've now gone completely into a further depth of this pool, like I said a moment ago at the start of the show, to the point where like that can't touch the bottom anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm really what I'm at is that Fae are real. Fae are listening to this show. Fae are interceding real time in episode creation of this show. That's what just happened now again, and happened at the start of this show. At what point do they need to come physically out of the wall so I can take a picture of them? I think like they already are saying we're here, we're here, we're here, we're here. They keep saying it in the most creative, beautiful, funny, poignant, powerful, like the sound of the perplexity in your voice there when you're looking for those cards, that's podcast gold. Thank you, Faye. I can't script that. That shit's amazing. I can't believe I got that on record as part of my podcast. What the fuck? This is so cool. That's how I honestly feel. Like, wow. I'm hanging up that disbelief hat, and I might not put it on anymore because I don't mind getting my head wet in the rain, if you know what I'm saying. I guess with all that said, all those beautiful discussion points, all this amazing Fae movement of objects with meaning, makes me really second guess the value of tarot cards or card decks now that this has happened. Don't think I really gave those fair value. I think I'm going to rethink that now. But let me ask you my favorite question, please, Emma. With all this amazing speculation under our belts here tonight, and with the idea, of course, that there is no wrong answer or right answer for that matter, and I know you know this is coming, what do you think that fairies are?
The truthful answer, like tonight, is I don't 100% know. I've always, when I've heard you ask other people that, I'd contemplate it. Sometimes I can 100% say I think they're definitely part of nature. They're like guardians of nature, like maybe like a manifestation of nature. But then I think there's more to it than that. Definitely real beings that aren't fully in our reality. But I think we're all connected somehow on some spirit level, whether it is energy and it's a really difficult one. And like I said, I think on certain days it changes day to day what I actually think they are. But then the nature of them, maybe we're not really supposed to know. I don't know. The tricksy, changeable way that they are. I think they may be quite like that we don't quite know.
We started off with one of those first cards reflective of how fairies like secrets.
Yeah.
And how fairies like communication amongst the tribe. And we end up with the cards moved, which is the Fae doing that. That's so hard to like really accept, but I do think what you're saying is correct. I don't know either, first of all. I really don't know. I'm so confused. And the confusion grows deeper when I try to piece together, okay, so they're listening to this episode in real time. They're in your house moving cards. Also real time signaling me to ask about that again. Seemingly ground we've already covered. It's just weird. Like, at what point do you attribute supreme intelligence to these little mofos? They're real smart.
Real smart.
Real smart. I wouldn't play chess. I'd lose. I've said that, I think, before too, but I don't know. But this is a real phenomena of extreme intelligence, meaning they're great communicators, they're great playwrights. Like, making these episodes is like living out the craziest mushroom trip on some level. It's truly like on another level, like starting with how lit up I felt when we started talking, the whole associations from guest A to guest B, which is like a set of dominoes for this entire 30 plus episodes. And then, of course, culminating in these cards moving around as, like, both for you and for me, those confirmation cards came up. And let's not forget, we were talking very deeply about what these traumas actually are. So I really do think those cards are bang on. I do think the Fae listen almost better than I do to this show. And they throw in their liner notes and do their editing real time so that it's on the record. That's what I think.
And they like to lift your vibration, lift your energy. Obviously, they're famous, aren't they, for their love of sweet things and shiny things and music and dancing and playing tricks and just having fun, really.
And you know what? We can be that same way too. We can be legendary for that stuff too. I do think we used to party and dance with these guys. I really do.
I think it's like it's a like remembering, like a great remembering of what our ancestors knew.
Yeah, I'm inclined to lean more towards that too, because I don't like the idea that I'm a pioneer figuring out new knowledge. It doesn't feel like that's correct when I ask myself about that. As I move to let you go here tonight, and we talk about what are confirmations and what are not, I told you about that woman who appeared out of the log, right? And I just couldn't figure that out. And then, of course, a woman comes walking around and she's like, hey, did you know about the cave behind that log? So I'm like, okay, that was really weird. And then last night, I was really stuck on this woman because it was so bizarre. And not the least of which is how the heron got startled. He would have been startled far earlier if she had just been walking up the river. Because he got startled by her popping out of another reality is pretty much what I witnessed. And her response to him was one of Fae to Fae. Oh, hello, friend. It was totally Fae to Fae. I was drifting off, and I, in my head, asked last night when I was about to drift off, was that woman a fairy? And as I did, the owl went right then, and I got the craziest wave of goosebumps all over my body, so strong that I actually said out loud, okay, shut that down.
Yeah, because you already knew.
I already knew, but like Timothy Renner, I needed to ask, and I got my answer. Timothy Renner from Strange Familiars recently saw a representation of a man who he felt was actually Bigfoot, and he asked, could I see you, Bigfoot? And he heard kind of internally, you already have. And I just feel like I understand Timothy Renner now, because when I asked, was that woman a fairy? And she popped out and I got that hit. That's getting to the point where that's all the confirmation I need. But it is truly lovely to see them moving your tarot card deck around and it flexing like that, just to make sure that everyone else listening believes too. Because that's why they're showing up, if nothing else. I mean, maybe they're having a good time, but hopefully Fascinating Fae at some juncture is part of what brings the Fae back. I want that to be what this show ultimately helps to do, I think, is where this is going. Because, I mean, I can just keep asking people what they saw, and it's just going to keep getting more and more real. At what point are they going to just move tarot cards or show up when people are listening to episodes, down the line, saved episodes producing, little feet. Because, I'm not making that episode real time when you're having that experience. They can literally hitch a ride on energy flows of all type, whether that's the love beating out of your heart or the data stream down the fiber optic cable. They're literally, I think, like, not that I know, and not to try to answer the question I just asked you, but I will kind of finish with this last thought as I go to do my housekeeping and then give you the last word. I keep coming back to this idea in quantum physics of light from the sun in particular, because I'm just trying to keep things on Earth here for the sake of the show, not getting into like crazy space and galaxies and everything like that, even though that's possibly still part of it all. But the light from the sun from that nuclear explosion, which definitely for a fact has produced life on Earth, because we're having this conversation, I'm alive, you're alive, we know for sure, that's a fact. All living things are possessing of a soul. And I love the fact, Emma, that you cared for abused and neglected animals. I can imagine how hard that is. As you know, I'm a vegan animal rights activist, and I love animals deeply. And I view their consciousnesses as analogous to our own. So that's why I don't hurt them or eat them. I don't want to freak them out. They're nice dudes, and they don't deserve it. I'll just finish with one last thought, because you did mention that animals do become abused and hurt, and nothing is more abusive or hurtful to an animal than killing it to eat it. We as humans, generally speaking, even the poorest among us, have a lot of possessions, even if it's just a cup and our clothing. Animals don't have any possessions except for themselves, and we just want to take that from them too. It's really a shame. The one thing they have, hey, give me you and all your fur on you or all the meat in you. It's like the one thing they own is themselves, and we still find a way to take that from them. So think about it next time you go to do it. Anyway, not a judgmental podcast. I used to kill animals and eat meat. We're all on our journey, but I do want to acknowledge that and appreciate that about you as we go to leave here tonight. But I do think that, like, the idea that animals have a soul analogous to ours, the idea that we ourselves have souls perhaps analogous to the Fae, that perhaps some of the capabilities of the Fae, certainly their emotional capabilities and their capabilities to listen and to send messaging, makes them feel to me like intelligent communicators, aka people. And not just a nature spirit. I feel like there's so many different manifestations it would appear, but each one of them is a beautiful type of communication, and we're able to perceive it in its beauty. And like I'm saying about all these souls around us, I do think that as I go to leave here tonight, what I'm trying to kind of wrap up is like, not knowing what the Fae is like not knowing what ourselves are. It's truly the same question.
Yeah.
And they keep throwing into concern for me what everything is, including time, distance, technology, thought, emotion, physicality. All of this stuff has been drawn into dramatic question by Fae stuff associated with making this show. And that just keeps tripling down and doubling down on the mind bender of my first Fae visual experience in 2019. I kind of have since realized through doing this show, and tonight is a really, really strong example in my opinion, Emma, I keep having Fae experiences. I feel like we've had a shared Fae experience by making this podcast tonight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. Yeah, totally. And it was the fact that feeling that we both had when we first started speaking is the same sort of feeling that I get when I have Fae experiences on my own as well.
That's how you know they're about.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how you know they're about.
Yeah.
It's like when those hummingbirds and the cop showed up at Katie's episode, it was the same. You can hear it in my voice at the start of the episode when I'm telling her I'm lit up and confused. It's like, what was that?
And that's why I think as well, when I have any type of like spirit encounter or anything, I know it's not just my imagination, because it's the feelings. It's the feelings that I physically have, or sensations or smells, or because I do experience like multiple levels of it.
what you're saying right there is you confirming the message of the cards back to you.
Yeah.
Truly. It's like you're saying to the cards, yes, actually here is what, yeah, you're both echoing the same musical note there.
Yeah.
The most recent cards, I mean, about
Yeah.
look around you. And yeah, it's truly, truly interesting to have this conversation with you tonight, Emma. I never know what to expect when I pick up the mic to do one of these. And every single time I'm like, wow, how cool is my life? This is so cool. This was really cool. Thank you for your time. Thank you for, I mean, all of this. This is incredible podcasting. I'll say it again. This is cool shit. And I'm happy. I'm really happy and honestly humbled to be part of this experience of documenting and creating these episodes and how powerful they are turning out. With that said, can I do some housekeeping as I go to let you go?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, for everyone listening, you're listening to Fascinating Fae, and I don't usually say it, but I probably should. I'm your host, Jim. I hope you've all had a good time here tonight, because I know that I sure have. And it wouldn't be a Fascinating Fae episode if I didn't say, on behalf of all of the human and non-human listeners tuning in to Fascinating Fae tonight, of which we know there are at least a couple in your place and mine, super, super tarot card disappearing mega thanks to Emma for being on the show here tonight. If you would also like to be on the show and maybe see what the Fae have in store for you when it comes time for your episode, shoot me a line, encounters@fascinatingfae, the website where all these pictures we've referred to will eventually go as I keep on my professional endeavor with the website update, will be at fascinatingfae.com. Same with all the socials. Mostly you can find me at Facebook for like if you want to actually engage with me. And all that's found at Fascinating Fae. So with all that said, I guess I do just really quickly want to say a super big thanks on behalf of all the human and non-human listeners to the Fae that appeared in this episode. In addition, one more time to that thanks being extended to our guest Emma here tonight. Because, this is one of those rare occasions where I'm going to say both were on the show for sure. Emma, I don't think I can add any more value here tonight other than to hand that last word off to you, our incredible guest. So here you go.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on. And just keep your eyes peeled, everyone, because they are around all the time.
Daylight dawns, the world is waking, and we are breaking time, is tumbling on again. Haunted by our own biology, commanded by technology, we're gliding to the end. And the power lies in possession of a few, and the rest of us, we don't have a clue. We were born without a name, but soon enough it came. We are the race of man, we hold this world in our hand, but we've lost the grip and taken the wrong train. Instinct leads us to expand and leave our scars in every land. There's no return and no one to explain. came, it soon became clear we were new. A power we held and it grew. It's grown out of control. But through time and through space we will bombard. But we have drawn a bad card and dug ourselves a hole. We were born without a name, but soon enough it came. We are the race of man. We hold this world in our hand, but we've lost the grip and taken the wrong train. On and on until we're gone. The darkness lurks within the dawn. From queen to pawn, we're standing here in vain. Firefly, oh how you caught my eye. In the darkness of night I look to you for light. The memories aren't what they used to be. We're changing endlessly into the new tonight. So look and listen, don't worry what you're missing out on isn't for you anyway, you see. And get to living with the hand that you've been given, darling. Promise that you will remember me. In melody, you are a mystery. How you capture me every once in a while. And lullaby, you make me wonder why the days are going by. And still I'm a child. So look and listen, don't worry what you're missing out on isn't for you anyway, you see. And get to living with the hand that you've been given, darling. Promise that you will remember me. In misery, why won't you let me be? Can't you set me free? For good this time, tranquility. Why won't you stay with me? Keep me company. If you would, I would be fine. So look and listen, don't worry what you're missing out on isn't for you anyway, you see. And get to living with the hand that you've been given, darling. Promise that you will remember me. Firefly, oh how you caught my eye. In the darkness of night I look to you